And hello everyone, this is Mr. Harper, and we are starting a new unit on leaves. You know, we did the anticipation guide last class, and so now we're having a follow-up here, a little bit of a lecture on leaves. So why do plants need leaves, and why are they so important? So, you know, we hear about green industry, and plants, they're the big industry because we rely on plants for a whole lot of things. We rely on them for food, oils, lumber. But they feed virtually all land animals and water animals in the seas too, because without plants, we would have no food, because plants, they get their energy from the sun, and then animals eat the plants. Now, if you're a carnivore, you eat other animals, but those animals you're eating eat plants for their food. So all energy comes from plants because they're getting their energy from the sun through a process, of course, that we call photosynthesis. Now, photosynthesis takes in carbon dioxide and takes in water and sunlight and changes that into energy and then releases as a waste product oxygen that we breathe in. Now, what is the part of the plant that does this wonderful thing? Well, it is the leaf. The leaf is made just to absorb sunlight. That's its job, to absorb sunlight and do photosynthesis. And to do this, there are two basic parts of the leaf. You have this big, broad, flat piece that we typically think of as a leaf, but you also have this thin little stalk that attaches the leaf to the stem called the petiole. It's actually part of the leaf too. So two basic parts of the leaf: the blade, the broad, thin part, and the stalk, the petiole. Now, some leaves look very different than others. You can think of like needles on a pine tree. The needle is the blade. And some plants, especially when you're thinking about like pines and other evergreens, some evergreens don't have a petiole at all on their leaf. It's just the blade is attached directly to the stem, but the blade looks much, much different. Okay, so blades are optimized to take in sunlight. Now, there are two basic kinds of leaves. The first one is called a simple leaf. It has one blade and one petiole. The other is called a compound leaf. And there are two kinds of compound leaves. So I want to get here to the pictures. Here's a simple leaf. One blade, one petiole. Here's a compound leaf. There's two different kinds. One petiole, many little leaves that we call leaflets. Many little blades, I should say, that we call leaflets. Okay? And here's another one, another kind of compound. One blade, many little leaves called leaflets. This happens to be a buckeye tree. Now, there are two kinds of compound leaves. One's called pinnate, the other's called palmate, and here's how they're different. Take a look at this picture. In a pinnate leaf, you have a long petiole that has the leaves coming off of the petiole at different points. They might be right across from each other like this, or they might be alternate, one here, one here, one here, one here kind of thing. Whereas the palmate has a petiole, and all the leaves come off of the petiole in a cluster from that one center point. That's the difference. Pinnate, all the leaflets don't come out at one point. Palmate, they do. Let's look a little bit at the anatomy of a leaf. We know it's a blade and a petiole, but let's take a little bit of a look at this blade part. The leaf has a covering of dermal tissue. That shouldn't surprise you because stems have a covering of dermal tissue. We call that top layer of the epidermis, remember? Roots have a covering of dermal tissue. They help to protect the thing. There's also inside ground tissue and vascular tissue, just like the roots and the stems. Ground tissue had various functions. Like, remember, in the roots, the ground tissue stored water. In the stem, the ground tissue could store water there too, or just move it across the ground tissue, not move it up and down. The vascular tissue is what does the movement, and remember, the vascular tissue is the xylem that moves water and the phloem that moves food. Remember, we have the straws in our models of both the roots and of the stems. The top and bottom of a leaf is covered by dermal tissue called the epidermis. And this epidermis is got within it a waxy cuticle. and the wax makes it a waterproof barrier that protects the leaf and limit water loss. Because water can evaporate through the leaf, and it does, but we want to limit that as much as possible. And this waxy cuticle does this. Now, here it is on here's the epidermis, this layer of green, and then here's this cuticle that covers over top of that. And same thing on the bottom, you have the epidermis and the cuticle over top of that. Now, think about leaves. If you live in an area where you have plenty of water, your leaf can be very thin. Plants that live in areas where there's less water, and I'm not thinking about a cactus here, so don't go that way, but plants that live in areas where there's less water, their leaves are thicker, and we call them fleshier. They're kind of squishy, and the leaf is thick because it has a really thick cuticle that's helped to design to eliminate water loss, to protect against water loss even more. The thicker the cuticle, the drier the environment that the plant lives in. Vascular tissue. So we've talked about the dermal tissue. Now let's talk about the vascular tissue. The xylem and the phloem are gathered together in the leaf to what we call veins that run through the stem, through the petiole, and then into the leaf blade itself. So here is a palmate example of venation of the leaf veins. The xylem and phloem come in at this point, and then they spread out from that one point. The veins do. Here's a pinnate vein. Here comes in the xylem and the phloem inside of the petiole, and then when it gets in the leaf, they come off in a pinnate fashion. These are the veins, and the veins are what carry the xylem and the phloem into the leaf. And you can see that the veins even get even smaller here in this cross pattern. Same way here, the veins get smaller to carry in water and to carry out on the xylem and carry out food on the phloem. So here's another way of looking at this. Within the leaf itself, in the center of the leaf, we have this xylem and phloem, the vein. Here's the cuticle and the epidermis on the top, and the same thing on the bottom. And this tissue in between, guess what? That's the ground tissue. So we'll stop at that point. So we've talked about vascular tissue. We've talked about dermal tissue. We talked about that leaves have two pieces. They have a petiole and they have a blade. And we talked about the fact that leaves can be simple, just a petiole and a blade, or they can be compound. One petiole, multi-little blades called leaflets. They can be pinnate or they can be palmate. We'll talk more next time.